All right, we're going to get started, and I want to welcome you to the Waypoint 55 webinar, which is a webinar on a ministry-related topic in 55 minutes or less that Waypoint provides for lay people in churches around the Waypoint region and beyond. And so we have a kind of a rotating list of ministries that we try and resource and support because we love the church, the bride of Christ, and want her to be at her best. And so we're glad that you're joining us, whether live or on our YouTube channel. Tonight, we're talking about missions, and two of our webinars every year are missions focused. But we also have webinars for prayer team leaders, safety and security team leaders, small group leaders, elders, and other leaders in the church to try and help you do your ministry better. And so we're glad that you're joining us tonight. I do want to share my screen right here and just tell you a few things before we jump in. As always, we want to thank Mid-Atlantic Christian University for being our ministry partner and sponsoring our webinar platform as they have since we began 6 years ago. We've got a YouTube channel. If you just search on Waypoint Church Partners when you go to YouTube, you'll see our channel. We've got 75 videos or so. They're training videos that we've been doing the last 6+ years, and they are organized in playlists. If you click on playlists, you'll see one of them is on missions. I think there's 12 trainings like this one tonight with great leaders from around the country, around the world, that provide some resourcing for ministry teams within the church, missions ministry teams, mission committees, mission committee chairmen, to help churches capture this vision for moving from caring about their missionaries to be caring for their missionaries. And there's a big difference of those two little words. And but we would love for you to also invite other leaders in your church that are in different areas of leadership in your church to check out the Waypoint YouTube channel and find the playlist that's best for them and to connect them to those webinars. We'd love for you to do that. Our next webinar coming up next month. It's usually the middle of the month on a Monday night. And so one of our great leaders in the state, Chris Barris, is using a Bible reading ethos. Everybody in the church is reading through the Bible multiple times, 3 times in 3 years, and with some format to that. We're going to talk about what that means for the discipleship quotient at the church, not just checking a list that I've read my Bible for the day, but what that means for discipleship in their church. And so we'd love for you to join that or recommend that to someone in your church that's focused on how can we help people. It's amazing what happens in the person's life when they start reading the Bible regularly. It doesn't make sense on other than spiritually speaking. It doesn't make sense the changes that happens with daily Bible reading. And so we're going to be talking about that. But tonight we're talking about missions, and we've got Andrew Jitt, who is the ICOM president, coming this year in November. And so ICOM is coming to Lexington, Kentucky in the middle of November, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. If you've never been to ICOM and your mission's interested, you need to come. And so it's in a different city every year. And Lexington is one of the closest cities that will be able to come from the Waypoint region. You come right across 64 and there it is. And so we want to invite you to come to that. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's a great conference of 10,000 probably missions interested people from around the country and around the globe. And Andrew is the president this year with this theme, Entrusted. That would be 2 Timothy 2:2, if I remember right, 2:22. The things that you've learned from me, share this with people, entrust this with people that can figure out how to share it as well. And so it's sharing the good news. And so that's going to be a great conference. And so we're so glad that we've got Andrew Jitt joining us tonight to talk about being a sending, sustaining, and receiving church, how you can really elevate the emphasis and the impact that you've got on the ministry partners, the missions partners at your church. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. Andrew lives in Evansville, Indiana. Is that right, Andrew?
Close.
Owensboro. I was confused the two. Owensboro, Kentucky, but he does not have a Kentucky accent. So, and I grew up in New Zealand, and so I love the New Zealand accent, Kiwi accent. And I want to get your title right, and this would be helpful for people to know that your title has changed very recently And there's many people that are in churches in the Waypoint region that have interfaced with IDES over the years. And so tell us about your transition from Emerge to IDES and what that looks like before we jump into anything else.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tim, for allowing me to be on here. Thank you guys for joining in, being part of this webinar. Love Waypoint, the ministry you guys do. So I actually just finished 20 years of church ministry. I was a youth pastor, did adult ministries, missions, local, global, sports ministries, all that good stuff. And in my last few years working at Owensboro Christian Church, I began our own sending agency because we had a pipeline in our church of about 35 under the age of 35 going into full-time missions. And so as we were growing missions in our church, it became a hard role of being a full-time, mission pastor, but not being able to really influence and provide the care that the church needed to do. So we actually birthed out our own sending agency, Acts 13, in motion, and to saying, how can we send, sustain, receive our missionaries from our church, our Timothys that are being sent out? How do we care for them well? And so as that has grown by God's grace, we have partnered intentionally with IDES through some different projects, and they were praying about what could it look like in their next 50 years, because they've existed for 50 years with projects all around the world. What could it look like for them to bring on field workers? So I have the blessed job of overseeing all the field workers. So my official title is Field Services Director, and really raising up people. And what I love about it is we raise them up within the church. The bride of Christ is at the forefront. We want to raise up Americans, but more importantly, we want to raise up the national church to send, sustain, and receive their people for the kingdom.
Yeah, so that's big news for a lot of people that effectively IDES now has missionaries for the first time in 50 years, rather than sending money just for disaster relief, that they've got missionaries on the field all around the globe. And so you're their boss, is that right? So you're the supervisor of the care and the supervision of all those missionaries, is that right?
Yep. And so, yeah, we'll just keep adding them as time goes on and the Lord opens up more doors, which is
Some people
amazing.
are curious how many missionaries at the first shot here with IDES going into this realm. How many missionaries are you currently caring for through IDES?
We've got 4 different fields, some open, some closed. And so, yeah, that's just from what I was leading have come in. And so the adoption should be finalized in the next few weeks. And then they'll all be IDES field workers around the world.
All right, super. Well, tell us a little bit before we dive into your content about helping churches just really move the needle on being uh, a, a partner with their missionaries and not just a funder of their missionaries. But before I do that, give us a little vision about the one thing that's really unique about this year's ICOM going to multiple sites.
Absolutely. So ICOM 24, like you said, Tim, is entrusted the theme. And as we looked at what God is doing around the world, we gather together in the US for ICOM, right? It's called the International Conference on Mission, but it's only in America. And so we had this vision as we were planning and praying about what ICOM 2024 could be, to say, what if we did it amongst the nations? And so by God's grace right now, we have about 30 different locations that are having their own individual ICOMs. And this is all through not only Canada, America here in Lexington, through Central America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. We've even partnered with believers, the MBB, so Muslim background believing church, in the Middle East, in places like Iraq and Lebanon and Beirut. And then, of course, the Promised Land, New Zealand. We can't leave them off the map. So it's truly going to be an international conference together. And the beautiful thing is, when you come to Lexington on Saturday morning, we're going to have a global worship service with different voices from around the world. And we're going to take communion together as the global church, united through the blood of Jesus, to then understand the heart of God, to then live out the mission of God.
Wow, that's going to be a great time together. I know there's a team from the church where I'm at that's going to be leading worship at one of your sites in New Zealand, and so they're really excited about we're excited about sending them. and supporting the missionaries that we support there, Michael and Ross Trusty, which is one of your missionaries, right? So we're really excited about the partnership there and the vision for the International Conference on Missions being legitimately international in 30 places. I didn't know it was that many. The first time I heard it, I was thinking it was like 7. But knowing you, that's going to probably end up being 100 by the time I come rolls around in November. Keep them coming.
We can get someone to Antarctica, we'll be on every continent. So, Tim, thank you for taking up the baton and going to Antarctica.
There's only penguins in Antarctica, so I don't speak penguin, so we don't have to do that. But well, let's shift gears a little bit, and I've got the slides for you that I'll be running, but would love for you to do the training that you would do with lots of churches. That's been a big part of your ministry, I know, and even the organization. Trying to remember the exact name of it, but my mom's been part of it.
Train
Um,
International.
what? Say that again?
Train International.
Yeah, no. The Missionary Care
Missionary Catalysts.
Collective, or is it the Missionary Care Collective? Trying to remember the name.
Catalysts.
Yeah, Missionary Care Catalysts, of how can we elevate the amount of care that churches are providing for their missionaries, rather than just assuming that their missionary organization is going to provide all the care that any missionary would ever need. And so I want to dive into the material and just train us on how our churches can not just be better, but really maximize and be the best we can be on supporting and partnering with our missionaries. All right.
Yeah. Well, what I love.
Let me interrupt you, by the way. I'm sorry. Oh, you almost got started. But for those that are joining us live, I want to encourage you, if you have a question, there's multiple buttons at the bottom of your screen, but there's a Q&A button. And when you think of a question, go ahead and hit that button, type in your question. I get it in a queue over on the side of my screen. And I'll have an opportunity to interrupt Andrew again, or interject maybe between points, or even at the end, to ask the questions that you have. If we don't get to it live, we can answer your question via email after the fact. But if you've got a question, hit your Q&A button and we'll try and address it as soon as we can. All right, Andrew, go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of it honestly stems from 2 Timothy 2:2, that the church is entrusted, right? And the Great Commission doesn't have any age restrictions. It's for everyone. So whether you're 8, 18, or 80, God's entrusted for us to take his gospel to the nations. But often what we do is just kind of marginalize missions to a few people. And a lot of times we quietly and politely excuse ourselves, and people do that and say, well, missions isn't for me. And so I love to challenge a church to get back to understand the heart of God. Because when we understand God's heart, it is for the nations. For missions is God's idea. He was the first missionary. And he goes after Adam and Eve, restores them from their sinful state, and then sends them out of the garden. And so this whole idea of missions comes from God. And we see it culminating in Revelation 7:9-10, where there's this beautiful vision, Apostle John giving this glimpse in heaven of every nation, tribe, people, and language. And so that's the task that we've been given. And we've got to help our churches not just talk about the Great Commission, but to make it part of who they are. Because growing up in New Zealand for 23 years, never once did I ever hear the Great Commission or the need to go to the nations. And so my real heartbeat is saying the American church is like a sleeping giant. We've got the tools, we've got the resources, but we just need to, again, align ourselves with the heart of God, and then we'll understand the mission of God. And when our churches can do that, it's a powerful force. And I love John 17, that Jesus prayed that we would be one. And when our churches can come together, learn from each other, challenge each other, which I know is your heartbeat, Tim, to saying, how can the church strengthen and encourage each other? But then in our local churches, how does that play out? And it begins, I believe, from just understanding the truth of the Word of God. And so the more that we can point people back to the Word, then they'll see, yes, not only are we given the gospel, but we're not told to keep the best news, right? The gospel message. We're told to use our lives in whatever format and whatever platform we have. But it's helping churches get to that point. And once we can get to that point, then we can be effective in sending, sustaining, and receiving what God has entrusted to us. And that's the most precious commodity, the people of God.
All right. Let me stop you right there and interject, and maybe you were going to do this anyway, but I'll ask you now, is could you spend a moment and just define send what you mean by it being a sending church? Because I think that for one church to the next, that might mean something slightly different. So when you say we're a sending church, what does that mean? What is sustaining meaning more than sending a check? Although that's part of it, financial sustaining, but what's this being a sustaining church mean? And then what's a receiving church, which I think is a brand new idea to most people.
Absolutely. So a sending church will say, right, how easy it is for someone in our church to become a missionary? And for a lot of people, and even asking a lot of pastors, it's kind of crickets, right? It's just very hard. And so it's going, how do you not just make missions a part of the church, but the actual DNA of the church? The Great Commission needs to be talked about and celebrated, what God is doing around the world. And when you talk about it and you celebrate it, then people start to go, well, what's my role in the Great Commission? And so for me, a sending church is one that develops a key pipeline or opportunity for people to get involved in mission. And it doesn't mean that we all send them all out. No, we've got to have people back being the supply line, right? Getting all the resources to people in that pre-field phase before they've made the decision to go. There's got to be an army around them, getting them to that point that they're then ready to go. And so sending phase is getting people ready, prepared, whether that's internally in the church through disciple making ministries. Because again, I believe that the light that goes the furthest shines brightest at home. So if people aren't making disciples in the communities in which they live, work, and play, why are they going to do it cross culturally in another city or another country or another continent? So it begins by developing opportunities for disciple making in your church, for people to get on board with God's heart for making disciples of all nations. And I love the Great Commission, right? And when Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, therefore go, that word go doesn't mean just to go to the other side of the world, but it means as you go, when you go, wherever you go. So developing that into your church, creating opportunities for mission engagement. So that's kind of the sending phase. You start to prepare them, get them nurtured, align them with where they're going to go, what they're going to do, and really partner as a church with that agency to come alongside them and to say, right, what's your role? What's our role? So it's not just, hey, we're just going to send them off, but we're developing the infrastructure for them to thrive, not only in before they get to the field, but then when they start to leave the field. So it's working hand in hand. So that's kind of the sending phase. The sustaining phase is when they actually get to the field. What does that look like? Well, for a lot of our churches, we're just ATM machines, and we throw money at organizations and say, you're the experts, you do it, we'll just take a back seat. And that's what we do. Good luck, see you in heaven. And so for us, it's going, no. And that's why we developed our sending agency called Emerge Global, to going, how do we create the opportunity for our church to truly be at the front line of mission? And so that begins by absolutely loving on the people as they are, just as they're getting ready for the field. You continue that engagement, walking alongside them, encouraging them, admonishing them, challenging them in who they are and what God is calling them to do. And so for us, that looks like setting out plans and goals and accountability and looking at how we can really help people thrive in the calling that God has placed on their lives. And we don't do it from afar, but we go and we visit them, we live life with them. We walk in their homes, in their streets, and we pray with them. And that's continually going on and on. And then when they decide to come off the field, whether it's for furlough or transition long term, we receive them well. We know they're coming home and we welcome them with open arms, and we continue to provide the care and the support that they need for reintegration, for debriefing, for figuring out, what is my culture? Where is home? What does home even mean? Loving on the families well. And I think so often when we receive missionaries or missionaries come home, I liken it to like rusty planes, right? When we're when the airlines are done with planes, what do? They send them to the desert and they just kind of sit stale, and rust gets them and they're not effective at all. And so, when we have missionaries coming off the field, it's about how can we love on them well? How can we support them, meet them where they are, and help them just have time to rest and be replenished and refueled for the time in which we then send them out, and we send them out well again, and then we sustain them, and then the pattern just keeps repeating.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I don't know many churches that think part of their role is to receive missionaries back in an effective and pastoral way. And so that's a great vision for the holistic mission for missionary to be before, during, and after their service on the field. I'll put a plug in here and then we'll get to your slides, Andrew. But for me personally, it's a small piece. But on the sending part, if you have people that are Great Commission people or missions interested people, bringing them to ICOM is one of the best things that you can do. And my wife and I have had the great pleasure of bringing people to ICOM with us. And this past year, our church had two gals that were looking for kind of gap year summer internships, and they found places to go around the world by coming to ICOM with us in Oklahoma City this past November. And we've had another couple in our church that was looking to serve for a couple of years, seasoned couple in our church, and they spent 2 years in an orphanage overseas after connecting with someone at ICOM. And if you haven't been to ICOM, there are 500 booths in the display area of different organizations doing big things and little things all around the world. And it will just blow your mind to see what God's doing through normal people at normal churches all around the globe. And so taking people with you to ICOM that are having even a glimpse, just a twinkle in their eye about the Great Commission, that it'll be one of the best things that you ever do. So that's an unpaid sponsorship for not just for Lexington, but for every year. But Lexington is drivable for most of us in the Mid-Atlantic region. So to come for any year, I will say that ICOM next year is in 26 will be in Atlanta, which is also relatively drivable for most of us compared to when it's in St. Louis or Kansas City or Oklahoma City. So the next couple of years, and then you'll have to stay tuned for an announcement within the next 3-4 months about when ICOM will be coming back to the Waypoint region. We've hosted ICOM in 2015 and 2021, and so we're in negotiations right now to be able to host ICOM again in Richmond, but it's not public yet, so we won't tell you the when, but stay tuned for that. But the sending, there's people in your church that just don't know what they don't know, and by taking them to ICOM, their eyes will just be so open, their mouths will be drop open about all that they can experience at a great week. 100 workshops. You're probably leading, well, this year as a president, you're probably not leading workshops, but I know you and your team lead workshops and all different kind of groups. It's just a great week. So that's my unpaid promotion for ICOM in general and Lexington.
Is having what we're calling a next step space. So if any of your churches are trying to figure out after a main session, hey, where do I go? Who do I talk to? We've actually got a lot of folks who have a lot of years in ministry and missions at a next step spot where you can just come and go, hey, I'd love to do this or explore this, or how can my church get involved in this, or this? And so it's just a real new thing that we're developing as a team to going, we want to help the church, and we want every church to walk away from ICOM saying, I'm entrusted. What's my piece? Is it send, sustain, receive? Is it to go? Is it to support more? Is it to pray more? What does that look like? So we're excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, all right.
So I love this quote from Giles Spurgeon, and it just kind of centers again why missions is important. But again, it shouldn't just be something that's on the side for just a small few people. And I love it that, yeah, if there be any one point in which the Christian church ought to keep its fervor at a white heat, it is concerning missions. If there be anything about which we cannot tolerate lukewarmness, it is in the matter of sending the gospel to a dying world.
Hmm.
Charles Spurgeon said that beautifully, and I love it because that's what our churches need to do. Keeping that fervor at a white heat. That is what we've been given, whether we're a church of 50 or 500 or 5,000. We're entrusted with this mission, and God is looking at us. We are plan A, there is no plan B. So what does our church look like and what are we doing? And the next slide kind of shows us, and hopefully this map is familiar to you. And if not, I want it to become familiar to you because it shows the state of where the gospel is going based on the Joshua Project. So the areas in green are where the gospel is. It doesn't mean that everyone in the green is a Jesus believer, but the gospel's taken root. People have access to the gospel there. The yellow is where the gospel is, and it's kind of taken root, but not as deep as the areas of green. And then we come to the red. And the red represents the unreached people groups of the world. That right now is estimated to be 3.4 billion people. 42% of the world's population has little to no access to the gospel. And what's crazy, Tim, is this. Out of all the money and all the resources given to missions, over 90% of our resources and our people go to the areas in green.
Hmm.
And the next 8 to 9% go to the areas in yellow, which means as churches, we are sending 1% of our people and pennies on the dollar to the 42% or the 3.4 billion people who've never had the gospel.
Hmm.
So we as the church need to understand our task, our role, and what does that look like within the Great Commission? And that looks like every church keeping that white heat, that burning passion for taking the gospel where it's never gone before. So we need to go to the areas in red, and we need to release and mobilize and multiply our younger generations to grow up understanding their part in the Great Commission. And when you look at scripture, God's heart is for the nations, right? You read through Genesis and it's just this beautiful passage of he creates mankind to know him, to worship him, and then he gives them the mandate to multiply, be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth. And so when we see Jesus come down on his short-term mission trip, right, for 33 years from heaven down to rescue us, Jesus gave us this model of sending. And so we read in Mark chapter 6, verses 8 to 11, Jesus called the 12 to him. He began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. So Jesus gathers the disciples to himself. He trains them. He gives them the pep talk to say, go 2 by 2. He gives them authority over the impure spirits. He teaches them and trains them on what to take, and that's nothing. Be dependent upon the Holy Spirit. So they're prepared in kind of pre-field training. Then we read in Mark 6:30 to 32, Jesus receiving those missionaries, but the disciples back. We read the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because of so many people were coming and going, they did not even have a chance to eat. He said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. So Jesus models for us what our churches are to do. We gather people and then we give them a task and then we send them out. And when they go, we sustain them. We give them the resources they need and then we receive them well. So Jesus brings them back. He debriefs with them. What did you do? What came? Come to a quiet place and get some rest. And so that is beautifully modeled by our Savior. Then we see the birth of the church in Acts 2 coming to fruition. And then in Acts chapter 13, we see the church sending. And I love the model of Acts 13. And that's really where our church began developing its sending mantra. So we read in Acts 13 now the church at Antioch. And Tim, do you know who started the church at Antioch, which is the greatest missionary sending church?
I don't.
Neither do I. Isn't that great? It's not a namesake, right? It's not someone famous. It's just ordinary people who started the church in Antioch that just sent people out all the time. But you look at the diversity in the church, prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon called Niger, Lucia of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up in Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were worshipping the Lord and fasting, Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I've called them. So after they'd fasted and prayed, they laid hands on them and sent them off. So again, we see this model of sending, gathering these people, laying hands, praying over them, preparing them for times such as this, and then the church sends them out. And then they get sustained while they're on the field, and then the church welcomes them back in Acts chapter 14. From Antioch, they sailed back to Antioch, where they'd completed to the grace of God for the work they've now completed. On arriving there, they gathered the church together, reported all that God had done through them and how it opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. And they stayed there a long time with the disciples. So if you want to wonder, should your church be involved in sending, sustaining, receiving? May you hear the heart of Jesus, our Lord and Savior, who gathered his disciples and modeled what that looked like. And that pattern is then reproduced in the local church to say, this is the model in which we are to complete the Great Commission. We don't just talk about it, but we act upon it. And so I'd like to challenge everyone who's listening to this to saying, what is your church doing in sending, sustaining, and receiving? Because we're all called to the same mission. And what's beautiful is if you don't have the ability to do some of that, there are great ministries and parachurch organizations that can come alongside you, great sending agencies that will partner with you. But I love what you said earlier, Tim, that it's working alongside the missionary and working alongside the agency. It's in partnership together. It's about good accountability, good defined roles on what is the church's role, what is the missionary role, what is the agency, how can we all serve together those that have been called out from our churches.
Again, I want to remind people, if you've got any questions about while Andrew's speaking, if you want to hit your Q&A button, ask a question, we'll try and get to that. So here's that missionary care catalyst that I was referring to that my mom has been a part of when it was, I know that they met several years at ICOM to kind of work on this, but you can explain this to us.
Yeah, and what it really was is to help a church going, how do we get involved in mission and not just doing, missions for them, but with them. And I love that because we can do a lot of things for them, but there's a beauty when the church comes alongside them. And so the first phase for us was all about discover. How does the church understand and celebrate God's heart for the mission and completing the task of taking the gospel? And then how do we invite and identify key people to then be a part of teams being sent out? And whether that team is the ones going or the ones that are staying behind, we discover how team can work together. Then as we get in that next phase, it's about developing. So what does the church do? Well, we mobilize churches and members within the church to support and to sustain the missionaries when they're overseas. We nurture, we ensure that they are sent for longevity, and then we deploy them. So we send them out and we encourage their support teams to keep holding them up and continuing ongoing relationships, that it's not a one and done deal. Hey, we've sent you off, now we step back. No, we come alongside them as churches every step of the way. I was talking to a church and they said, oh, well, that's for the agency. We just send money. And I'm like, no, may you understand God's heart for caring, supporting, sustaining people well, because that's how it was modeled from Jesus to the church, and now for us to follow in those footsteps. And then the next slide, Tim, will just kind of captivate the idea of what does it look like to send, sustain, and receive folks well. Successful church-based missionary care reflects this biblical model of sending, sustaining, receiving. So as we discover, we help embrace God's plan, we discover his model for sustaining, and then we recognize and honor people in kind of that first phase. Second phase, we develop, we mobilize support teams to train and prepare people for the fields. We cultivate this culture of serving to meet the physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual needs of people. And then we prepare as they're coming home a welcoming, nurturing environment to listen, to pray with them, and to encourage. And it's so sad and frustrating. I've heard this time and time again for missionaries that when they come home, they get 3 minutes on the stage to share about 3 to 5 years of mission work.
Mhm.
That's not receiving missionaries well. It's saying, hey, how can we integrate you and have you part of our worship time, our worship experience, our Sunday gatherings, and having other opportunities for deeper dialogue. We've got to create opportunities to hear what God is doing around the world. And that's one of the beautiful things is that here in America, yes, we are a great sending country, but we've got to learn from the global south and from the east and what God is doing in countries all around the world. Then, as we deploy, we prayerfully launch each missionary with defined partnerships between the church, agency, family, friends. What does that look like? We activate teams to provide two-way communication, and that's key, two-way. It's not just them reporting, because they can tell you the truth, but you want to know the whole truth. You want to know what's going on. And when you build relationship with these people, they invite you in. And I remember so clearly, this is a bad story, but it just highlights the nature of what sustaining really means. I went to Thailand to visit a partner that our church had supported for about 10 years. And when I arrived at the church to be their first ever missions pastor, I said, who's that gentleman on the wall? And they said, well, his name's Preacher. I said, well, what can you tell me about him? They're like, we don't know much about him. And I was like, but you've supported him for 10 years. And they're like, yeah, we receive a handwritten letter. So I made some inquiries. We wrote back and forth by handwritten letters, old school. Then we started emailing because he figured out he could use his son's computer. Went to visit him. Arrived there. The next day, after arriving, we sit down, we start to chat. And he said to me, Andrew, are you here to cut me? I said, no, we're here to learn from you and about you. And he said, you've supported me for 10 years and no one from the church has ever come to visit me.
Mm.
And it just broke my heart because our church should be at the forefront of saying, how can we, sustain you well and create that two-way communication, but that encouragement of coming and being a part of it. And then when he came to the States, we provided resources for him to integrate into our church and to be a part of it. And now that church loves him, they embrace him, they've even helped plant another church that he's a part of as well. And it all begins by going and understanding and walking with them through the everydayness of life.
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt you, Andrew, but we've got a couple more slides that we want to get through in our time, but I'm proud to be a part of a church that's really over the last 7 or 8 years tried to make this big switch from caring about our missionaries to caring for our missionaries and being a true two-way partner. And so that we do have another webinar on our YouTube channel about making a bigger impact with fewer missionaries. And so that was the first thing that we did is we went from like 15 missionaries down to 5 missionaries. And I talk about how you do that diplomatically and in a way that honors everybody that's current partners. But once we got down to 5, then we made a commitment that we're going to come on the field every year to see you. And we've got teams that go every year. And by teams, you think a lot of churches think missionary teams because they see pictures on Facebook, 12, 15, 20, 30 people. A lot of our mission teams from our church are 4 people, 6 people at max. And we will send a team to each of our partners to do nothing but care for them. There's no mission, no project. We'll take them on a retreat away from their home to a retreat center in their country and try and that was new for us to figure out, oh, they need care from us, not just for us to come and they need to babysit for us for a week while we come and kind of get in their way. And so I'm proud of the fact that we made that commitment to we're going to be here every year to care for you. You can trust us. We'll be here, no agenda. And then the other thing is we've new for us in the last 2 years is care teams for each of our partners that meet very regularly about quarterly about how can we care for, and so they know birthdays, anniversaries. They know when other mission trips are going from other churches, and we can send stuff in suitcases that they're wanting. If we've got one missionary that they love Pop-Tarts and they can't get Pop-Tarts in their country, so we mule Pop-Tarts in other people's suitcases. But our care team knows what it is that they like and what we can send them, and those kind of things. And so I say that to encourage people that you don't need a missions pastor at your church. You just need a vision for how can we pastor our missionaries. And if you get some good people in a room around a table and start dreaming and praying about that, you'd be surprised at the real practical ways you can start caring for your missionaries. And this is exactly what you've laid out here, is from beginning to end. Sending, a lot of work to do on sending. Then sustaining, what can you do to sustain them while they're there? And then the receiving is a whole new idea for most churches. All right, let's jump in to
And
text
just
one.
to that as well, Tim, thanks for sharing that, because we've got to understand missionaries are ordinary people. They're just like you and I. So what do you love? Communication. You love friendship. You love just talking about what is going on in your life. And so often we think, oh, we kind of put missionaries on a pedestal as if we can't get to them spiritually, but they're just ordinary people. And I remember when we went and visited a partner in Kenya, and we're sitting out under the Turkana sun, and it's setting, and then it became night, and we're talking about Ohio football, right? I don't even know anything about football, so I was just listening intently because we play real man sport rugby. But our missionary just loved it. He's like, I get to talk about my home state and the football season that has just happened with
Mhm.
people I love and respect. And it's just doing life with them. And so it's not saying, hey, you're over there, therefore out of sight, out of mind. But it's saying, no, how do we bring them into the church? But how do we bring the church to them as well? And it works both ways.
Yeah,
And I love that you guys are committed to going as a church, because even in my missions budget, one of the line items that we had was a leadership fund, so that I would take elders down, or I would provide scholarships for high school students and college students to come with me to see what God is doing around the world. And that's how I develop pipelines, by just dragging young people with me. Had one young person who'd never been on a plane before, and his first time on a plane was to Ethiopia.
gosh.
So 14 hours later, welcome. Hope the flight was good.
Yeah. Well, and with modern technology, there's a lot of things that technology is not good for. But once you take people with you on a team of 4, 6 people to see your missionaries, they can text them like they're like normal life, like you can text every day, and about just regular old stuff. And by you, I mean just an average person at your church that connects with the missionary, they can talk about football or they can talk about whatever just by texting. And that's a connection that we weren't able to make a generation ago when it was pen and paper, right? And you had to mail it and hope it got there in a month or more. But now you can keep a conversation rolling with a missionary, a daily conversation with someone in your church that connects in a kind of a relational way with the missionary, and the power of them feeling like they're known and they're seen even from afar is so amazing. And all it takes is a text every once in a while from someone in your church that's not paid to do it, not the missions pastor or the preacher, but some Joe that took a week of vacation to go on this mission trip, and now he's texting the missionary. Michael Trusty in New Zealand was a basketball player, in college, and you can text him about basketball all day long, and he'd love that. So it's real simple to just start that process. All right, let's go to these last couple slides here. This one is you can explain it, then I've got it in half and half once you kind of give us the context of this slide here.
Yeah, so this is just a basic tool that I use as director over different fields, but it's a way that we care holistically for people, right? A lot of times you'll go and you'll want to know, how are you doing? And what is the Christian answer? I'm fine, right? Well, what part of them is fine, right? So this is a great tool to kind of dig under the surface a little bit, to going, okay, how can we understand what is taking place in the various aspects that make up the totality of who someone is? So we start off with spiritual, then we go to physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, hence the word spire. So we really, when I'm talking to a missionary, I'm going, okay, how are you growing and connecting in Christ? And so rather than going, well, I'm going okay, we get them to print this out and put it laminated if possible, and then they can just kind of fill in, hey, is it one? Is it two? Is it three? Is it four? Is it five? And it kind of gives us a baseline from the spiritual to the emotional across the board to say, how are you doing? So, hey, spiritually, man, I'm doing so good, but just intellectually, I'm just not growing right now. Or I may be really struggling with this, or emotionally, I'm just tanked out. And so getting a guide like this, it then provides us kind of a baseline to say, where can the church step in? What resources do we have in the church to come alongside this person and to help them in their everydayness and their struggles? So these are kind of the questions that we just get them to think through and going, am I a one? Am I struggling right now, or am I thriving as a five, and something in between? And so it gives you an opportunity to ask your missionaries, where are you at? How can I help you? And where do you want to get to? And it just addresses every aspect of their life. Because again, oftentimes for churches, our scorecard is bums and bucks, right? But it's going, yeah, we care about them spiritually, but these people have physical lives, intellectual and relational, emotional needs as well. So how can we as a church come alongside and reach the totality of who they are?
Yeah,
And this has been great to be able to speak into people and then going, hey, man, this team's going down and these guys could really use this resource or this tool, or how could we help this connect with them more?
yeah. I would assume that it's really looking at the progression from one of these to the next. If someone has put five on one of these categories, five, 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 and then all of a sudden they put a three,
Mhm.
it's a statement, isn't it? That all of a sudden, even though three doesn't sound like it's a bad number, it's making a statement that I've been five for the last year, but this time you asked me I'm a three. It's like, oh, what's going on that you lowered your personal self ranking there? And so it gives you an opportunity to really uh, strategically measure how your missionary is doing and figure out how you can then provide the care you need as a partner. That's great stuff.
Yeah.
I do want to interject. Roger Carr asked a question here. Are the slides going to be available afterwards? The answer is definitely yes. If you go to our website, um, that on events, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's the resources from all the webinars that we've done. If there was a PDF, but we'll make these slides into a PDF for you, and in particular, so you can grab these images as tools for you to use with your mission partners. And then Roger just really highlighted just what a powerful impact. He works with COI Kim and Reaching Asia missions, and to be able to use Zoom even the interface we're here, but you can Zoom with your missionaries all day long as you can figure out the timeline, of how many hours off they are. But to Zoom and not make it a big deal, a 10-15 minute Zoom where you're just chatting for a few minutes, or FaceTime, WhatsApp, whatever technology you can use to make them feel like they're seen and heard. Someone knows them, rather than just being all the way around the world and forgotten. And so, what a great opportunity we've got in this era of the church versus any other era that the church has ever had to be really that sustaining part, but having a relationship with our missionaries like we've never had in the past. All right,
Absolutely.
here's the last slide for you right there.
Yeah. So this is the octahedron, which is great. And so this is what we actually use, as well as Spire, to help going, how can we create a balanced form of missionary care? So the recipient, the missionary, is in the middle of this receiving phase of this with God at the top, but then we have all these structures around them to speak into it. So it's not just one voice, but going, what can the church do? What can those that have been sent out do? What can the partners? Because we need a team to carry the supply line to the troops on the front line. So what can that look like? What are the friends and family support look like? What are the professional cares that we need to be thinking through? And then as well, what is the self-care that missionaries have the tools to develop in what they're doing. And so what we've moved to in my organization is we create a annual care plan for our missionaries to fill out. And so they have to identify what is their levels of care from God, from their church, from their partners, from their family, from professionals, and what are they doing to provide self-care. And so annually, our care team director looks at those, we'll read them, pray over them, share them with us, and then we look at them periodically as they check in for member care times. And so it's this ongoing conversation to say, how are you doing? Where are the gaps? And how can we fill in? Because if one of these is weak, we don't have a proper structure. If one's failing, then it's, eroding what the care should look like. So we want to ensure that all of this is strong at every phase, whether it's ascending, sustaining, receiving phase, that it continues on to keep things balanced.
Yeah, that's great. As a former geometry teacher 30 plus years ago, the word octahedron is like the best word ever in one of our webinars. So I really appreciate that. Well, I don't know if there's anybody that's got any more questions, but this gives you a couple of tools, really practical tools that you can use to have even a kind of a regular every other month Zoom call with your missionary, and have that Spire format, and use this octahedron as kind of a to gauge the temperature, what's missing, what's thriving, and what's not, so that you can be a really powerful partner for your missionaries in sustaining them while they're there, and even when they're coming back, are they being cared for? I think what a picture of the plains in the desert, that are just kind of retired and put out to pasture. And there's so many missionaries that have so much to give when they returned, but we just don't even have the lenses to see them. So that's great.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about a couple other Waypoint things that are coming up. But more than anything else, we want to reiterate, we want to invite you and all of your missions interested people, all of your Great Commission people in your church to attend the International Conference on Mission that's coming up in Lexington. So you can find them online, register. There's housing, there's shuttles from the hotels to get you there. There is childcare and kids programming and youth programming. There are main sessions, workshops, exhibit booths, 500 exhibit. I mean, it's amazing 2-3 days. And if you haven't been, I want to invite you to be there. Andrew is our president this year. And so we're doubly excited for that. And so that's in Lexington, Virginia. And so that we would hope to see you there. And Waypoint has a booth. We share a booth at the New Church Network. And so there's about 20 church planting organizations that share a booth. And so if you're from the Waypoint region and come to ICOM, would love for you to stop by the booth and say hello and connect with you. And you can talk about what you're learning about entrusted, that we have been entrusted with the gospel, and then God is trusting us to share that gospel. And so we'd love to see you there. So Andrew, thanks for your time tonight and for your role in the body of Christ at large, equipping the church to accomplish the Great Commission, not just in our church and in our neighborhood, but around the world. Thank you for your leadership there. And we're really looking forward to your leadership of ICOM coming up in November.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. Blessings to you. Thank you. And yeah, love what Waypoint's doing. So thank you for what you're doing and equipping us as the body of Christ to live out the mission of God.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And we'll see you in Lexington.
Perfect. Thanks, brother.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.